Joining me now is Gloria Allred, a renowned victims' rights attorney who has represented 27 survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. Gloria, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Justin.
Victims of Jeffrey Epstein have faced continuous delays in their pursuit of justice. Now with survivors advocating for transparency on Capitol Hill and receiving bipartisan support, do you sense a shift in momentum?
Well, I do sense that there are some Republicans who have decided that, yes, if they want to be on the right side of history or herstory, then they need to side with and support the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, even though they're getting perhaps contradictory instructions from the administration. They understand that it's really important to support survivors, some of whom were children when they were sex trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And members of Congress listened to many of them this week and were very moved by what they heard. So I'm glad there's support. Now, whether there's going to be enough votes for a discharge petition in the Congress to to get a subpoena that would call for all records to be turned over, we'll have to wait and see. The administration apparently doesn't want that, but there are some Republicans that have moved over with the Democrats to do, as you said, support transparency and a release of all public records.
Well, let's talk about the Republicans who are supporting this movement. Now, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is urging Republican members to avoid Congressman Thomas Massey's petition aimed at releasing the Epstein records. In fact, two co-sponsors of the bill, Thomas Burleson and Tim Burchett, both signaling they won't be supporting the measure any longer. Are you worried Trump will influence Republicans to block transparency here?
Well, I know that it appears that he's trying to do that. Ordinarily, his members, other Republicans, fall in line to support what the president wants. But there have been some rare exceptions, and this appears to be one of them. So we'll see. The administration, of course, doesn't need a subpoena in order to release the records. They could just do it voluntarily. They don't need permission of the court or anything. They only needed permission for the grand jury transcript, which was denied because that's, almost always secret. But the rest of it, the investigations by the FBI and Homeland Security, the prosecutions of Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell, that could be easily released. And so the real question is, why not? What's the holdup? Are they cherry picking the information and the names that'll be released? I'm very concerned, and I think a lot of the survivors don't have confidence in what they're going to get.
Speaking of cherry picking, this actually had just broke. Axios and Newsweek were revealing that Joseph Schnitt, the acting deputy chief at the DOJ's Office of Enforcement Operations, was secretly recorded on a hinge date, claiming that if files related to the Epstein case are released by the Trump administration, they'd, quote, redact every Republican or conservative person mentioned. What's your reaction?
Well, Justin, this should not be a political issue or partisan issue. And I think if only if only the Republican names are removed and Democrats, some of whom have nothing to do with this, and have their names included, there's going to be even more suspicion among the survivors. I think there's a lot of suspicion right now. Why is it taking so long just to release records and investigations? Why? There are suspicious transactions that I know the Congress is looking into, and this is yet another suspicious incident if, in fact, they're going to redact some Republican names. Now that that is leaked, maybe they won't do it because, as they say in the South, they would have a lot of splaining to do if that's what they did. So the only thing that should be redacted are the victims' names or anything that would identify them. But no, not any names of a third party. For example, men who associated with Jeffrey Epstein, did business with him, socialized with him at his parties. No, these all need to come out. But just because they do come out, that doesn't mean these men have done anything wrong. It just means they went to the parties, they did business, And, maybe there's more to investigate, but it doesn't mean they committed any crime necessarily.
Polls show that 89%
Right.
of Americans actually support full transparency in the Epstein case. What can everyday Americans do to fight for the release of these documents? Because so many people, my friends who are Republican, Democrat, Independent, it doesn't matter. One thing that they all have in common is they want to know what is in these documents. What can people do who want answers?
Well, that's so important because people do feel powerless and they do want answers. And people are writing to me saying, I want to support the survivors. I'm very upset by what's going on. It's kind of a hide the ball situation, and they want to know what they can do. So my answer would be they should contact their representatives, Democrat and or Republican, who represent them wherever they live. And they can call the registrar of voters if they're not sure who represents them, or look online and contact those people, because the constituents have the most important voice in all of this. And they can say, we want the release of the files. And by the way, Justin, I don't think I've ever seen an issue where there was so much support from the public, Democrat, Republican, Independent, all for the same thing, transparency and release of the files. So it's a politically popular thing to do. And I think some of these people, some, the Republican bigwigs, let's call them, are very uncomfortable in having to tell their other members that they should vote against transparency and against the release of all the files.
Well, you're right. Releasing the documents is a very popular political thing to do, which is why President Trump campaigned on it. In fact, in the past, yet
true.
shortly after Epstein survivors spoke out courageously on Capitol Hill, the president referred to their demand for transparency as a, quote, Democrat hoax that will never end. What does the president's remarks do in terms of ratcheting up potential threats against these survivors, and what kind of impact is this having on them?
Well, I would say that's very hurtful and insulting to many of the survivors because they lived this nightmare. They were used and abused and exploited and trafficked, some of them, when they were children. So we're talking about sex crimes against children and sexual trafficking. And also, exploitation, sexploitation of adults. And so to say it's all a hoax is, in a sense, to say they're all lying, but they're not. I personally, because I've represented so many of them, I've seen emails, I've seen communications between Jeffrey Epstein and some of the survivors, and what they went through was real. And, he used and abused them, and he just didn't seem to care how old they were. Well, he didn't want them to be mostly over 18. He preferred younger people, as the president has said.
Well,
and
Gloria,
that's very suspicious and wrong.
absolutely. Gloria, you are a name and a face that is synonymous with fighting for victims' rights. So
Thank you.
long as you are here fighting for them, I at least know that there is a fighting chance that we will find out what happens here and that some form of justice is served. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you very much. I look forward to the next time. Thank you, Justin.